Hi, folks. Looks like we're live. Welcome to Ignore the Machine. I'm Bradley J., and I'm with Joe McGuirk, who's running for Cambridge City Council. And I know that folks don't watch very long, so I'm going to get right to the meat of this matter. First, hi, Joe.
Good morning, Bradley.
Good morning. Now, I met Joe. We've traveled in probably the same circles for a long time, but I met Joe the other night at one of his jobs. I don't know if you have more than one, but you were a prized bartender at the famous Highland Kitchen, so a lot of people meet you there, and that's a particularly good spot from which to understand the issues that are affecting people in that area and in the neighboring town. So since folks don't really stick around long and they want the goods right away, I want to get to why you're the guy for the job. And the thing that you spoke to me about first is confronting the housing crisis, and people, and perhaps including yourself, many folks run the risk and feel the fear of getting displaced. And you're going to address that, confronting the housing crisis by developing, well, you talk about it.
Sure, yeah, right on. So, I guess one of the reasons I decided to run, despite for a long time in my life, I thought my lifestyle thank you. My lifestyle might have disqualified me. Who would ever vote for a bartender to be in public office? But my lived experience is one that's shared by a lot of people in our city. And part of that is that it's expensive around here. The housing crisis it's impacting Cambridge, Boston, and the region we can see it all over the country. And it's not just impacting lower income folks, but lower and middle income folks. Prosperity has come, but it hasn't lifted all of us up. So I believe that lower middle income people often perform essential jobs. Cities need us. And when we talk about trying to confront the housing crisis, it's not an act of charity. It's one to preserve the well-being of our city for all our residents. So that's pretty much,
So how are you going to do that? How are you going to increase housing security for those who are on the edge of getting displaced all the time?
Sure. So I think that on a municipal level, there's only so much we can do. State level right now, there have been introductions of social housing programs. And there's in Boston, the mayor has proposed a rent stabilization. And those are great ideas. But that, again, she'll have to get the state to approve that. That's a home rule issue. In Cambridge, what some of the proposals that I want to do is maybe change some of our zoning restrictions. In Cambridge, there's something called the Affordable Housing Overlay. It's really an aggressive program to allow nonprofit affordable housing builders opportunities to build more. And we have a lot of restrictions in Cambridge, some of them about height, how tall we can go, and some of them about the frontages that we need to have. And loosening up those rules will allow us to build more affordable housing. There are 6,000 people who either work or live in Cambridge that need housing here. They qualify for affordable housing, but we don't have enough homes for them. And that will take care of some of our lower income folks. There's another idea I have about a municipally funded mobile voucher, like Section 8 programs that will be done by Cambridge as opposed to looking at the state. That could save, maybe 500 or 600 families, which is a big number if we can do that. And then, finally, some zoning reform. We should allow, one of the things that got us out of our housing crisis 100 years ago was the building of triple deckers. I don't know if you've seen the 3 families all over the city, but those would be illegal right now to build in most parts of Cambridge. I want to make zoning reform so we can build more of those, because increasing our housing stock will obviously hopefully bring the housing costs down. So
okay, so you speak about empowering workers and working families by enacting progressive labor, education, and housing policies. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think that one of the things in Cambridge, we spend $31,000 or $32,000 a year on our students, which is a great investment, but we don't often create paths for them to be successful once they finish school. Cambridge has devoted a lot of its commercial property to lab space. You may know that because it's why we have such an incredible tax base. Property owners in Cambridge pay pretty low taxes on their property.
Yeah, I actually, during the pandemic, Sligo, the bar, was my lifesaver. I would walk on my own from Brookline Village to there, which is about 4 miles, and all the way back too. But it gave me a place to go, and it gave me a home. I really liked it, and I like Doug Sherman, who used to work there. Now he's in the Middle East. It was what I did I loved it, and it's gone. That's real bad problem for me. That Sligo, that whole block, I guess, is gone
Yep.
for
You got to get it to lab space.
a lab. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is, Cambridge has put all its eggs in one basket. I think one of the things we should be doing is Cambridge was a manufacturing city at one point, and in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, that kind of went away. It became economically, they needed money, so they started doing lab space. But they really have gone full tilt on that. And now we've created a need for housing of a well-paid workforce, but we don't. Again, that's a housing issue. What I think, rather than dedicating more land to lab spaces, creating light industries. There are a couple big projects going on in Cambridge, and they're going to probably end up being labs. But if I get in there, I'm going to push to create light industry, manufacturing jobs, and green renewable energies, which would create entry-level jobs for our folks who are here, young folks who are here, but are not finding careers that can allow them to stay here. Workforce training, working with our labor unions to try to get workforce training, try to encourage that in our schools. In Cambridge right now, they don't teach you how to be an electrician or a plumber. There are some good programs in their technical programs, but we need to reinforce. We have a huge need for skilled labor, especially as we build more. But we're going to have a labor shortage if we don't create opportunities for those folks to succeed around here. In fact, in my industry, the restaurant industry, famously, we're seeing a huge drain of our labor pool. And I don't think it's because people are lazy, and I don't think that they were just happy to collect a check. I think a lot of them just can't afford to live here anymore. And so they move, and maybe they're working at a restaurant in another part of the country, but they're not going to pay some of the highest housing costs in the country to have a job whose wages are stagnated.
I get it. I would, if my situation didn't exist, I would be out of here.
Yep.
Okay. Systemic barriers. You talk about disrupting systemic barriers. You want to dismantle the systemic barriers. What are some of the systemic barriers?
Well, it's interesting. Cambridge is a pretty progressive city, and it historically has been. They vote Democrat almost 90% almost all the time. It's funny that the last Republican president that Cambridge ever voted for was Dwight Eisenhower's second term in a majority, right? That was like 52% of Cambridge people voted for him. But we do have to face the fact that Cambridge has had a history of creating barriers to folks. Some of our residents from succeeding. My family came up. My grandma was an immigrant from Ireland, and she was lucky enough to get public housing in a place called Newtown Court, which is pretty close to where I am right now. That public housing allowed her children to move into the working class and middle class. And that story was a really great story for my family's history. But what I learned in the last 4 or 5 years is that when they built those public housing units, they segregated them. There were two. And the other thing was they displaced a middle-class Black neighborhood to build those buildings. Cambridge has to face the fact that when we displace lower middle-income folks, we are doing that. Lower middle-income folks are disproportionately Black and brown families. We had a strong middle-class Black homeowning Black families who owned homes, middle-class homeowners, and yet because of the way we have not paid attention, we have driven them out. We have to be much more aware of the policies we make and how that impacts communities that have been disenfranchised, right? Whether it's by creed or gender or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Folks, we're speaking with Joe McGuirk, who's running for city council in Cambridge. And I don't know, folks, if you have noticed, but it's getting tougher for artists, like for musicians, to find a place to rehearse, for artist spaces. And you are aware of that, and you want to do something about that as well.
Sure. So my daughter's a working musician, and I've worked in bars as a bartender for over 30 years, but as a restaurant worker for over 40. And I've known so many musicians. It's Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? We've had some great clubs, but you mentioned Sligo's. We've lost Toad. We've lost Atwood's. We've lost a lot of our other small venues that young artists, working artists, can actually perform at. When we talk about housing, we have to include artists in that housing because they're essential to well-being in our city too. But when we talk about artists, we also have to talk about, as you said, the spaces that they need. Whether we do that through public funding or whether we encourage our private sector to stop looking to get the most money they can for the square footage, we have to, for the benefit of every resident of our city, we have to support our artist community. And it's difficult to target housing to one particular group, But I want to find out if we can do that, because I think artists bring so much to our community at great sacrifice to themselves.
Okay. Middle class is going away. Probably the same thing is the case in Cambridge. What can you do about that?
Well, I guess we're going to have more aggressive housing policies. And again, in Cambridge, there's only so much we can do. It is the idea of as of right fourplexes, right? Remove zoning restrictions that makes it okay for somebody to tear down a 2-family and build a 1-family, but makes it impossible in some neighborhoods to tear down a 1-family and build a 3-family. That will, I think, ultimately help, again, get some housing in there. And the other part of this is the same thing with the education program that I said before. In Cambridge right now, we're becoming incredibly stratified. The top 20% of our earners and the lowest 20% of our earners, those two groups are the only ones who are bringing more children to schools. While there's 60% in the middle, their school-age children numbers are shrinking. We have to encourage a more economically diverse city, and I think it's through housing policies and through labor policies that we'll get there.
Okay, this is kind of an aside. Well, no, we're talking about championing small business. Harvard Square has become so sadly boring. You see the pictures from back in the day, and they were independent businesses. They were one-off businesses that were cool, and and it would draw people to Harvard Square. Now, if you don't go to school there, it's boring, and there's really no reason to go there, and that is a criminally sad thing. Do you remember?
It'd be hard to imagine consignment shops in Harvard Square right now, but that's where a lot of us got our clothes or our gifts for our loved ones. Like consignment shops, used record shops, used CD shops, comic book stores. There were 23 bookstores, some of them used, in Harvard Square when I was young. It was awesome.
And interesting restaurants like the Worst House. I don't know if you, of course, you remember that.
Of course, the Worst House,
was fantastic.
Tasty. I
just thought it would be easy for a town to say, look, chain stores, please stay away. If there's a demand enough for a product or a service that a chain store can operate it, then why can't an independent place operate? I understand that large companies operate at scale, so like that is an advantage to them, but can't the town just say no?
So, funny enough, you probably remember this, that there were no chains in Harvard Square in the early 90s, and there's a Dunkin' Donuts on the corner of JFK and Elliott, and that was the first chain that ever went in. And it was they in fact had to change their color scheme to fit in, but it was it opened the door. And I understand the reason why. We live in a capitalist society, so I guess that once you made that change, it was going to be difficult. But when I think about my own personal life, I think we must be more thoughtful about how we spend our money. And we have to remember what the cost is of getting a shirt delivered to my house 2 hours after I decide I want it. What that effect has, not just on whoever made that shirt at that low price. When that is cheaper than going out and getting it yourself, we have to think about what the cost of that was. And we have to think about what that means to our community when we do it. We take away jobs from local people. We create havoc for our streets. So being more mindful is something that I'd like to really encourage all of us on our personal level. On a city level, one of the things I did last year was open up, we did a pop-up for an employee-owned tavern. And this was trying to highlight the difficulties facing restaurant workers and small restaurants as they try to survive in a city. And the point being this, that if we do value the authenticity and the uniqueness of our city, we must support those places that are unique and authentic to us. The homogenization of Harvard Square it threatens to make Cambridge look just like every other city.
Isn't it kind of too late? I mean, no, I shouldn't say it's too late. It already does. It needs to go back the other way.
It needs to go back the other way. We have the people always are like, oh, you can't put a building there that you're changing the feel of our neighborhood. The skyline of our city does not define who we are. It never has. Ever since they built the first barn, our skyline's been changing. But the values we hold in common are what we're trying to retain. And that is part of that is authenticity and uniqueness to our city. And we've got to do more. We've got to be mindful about it.
Yeah. For one of the real cool spots was just that newsstand in the middle there. What was the name of that?
Nini's Corner, or there was Nini's Corner and there was Out of Town News.
I guess Out of Town News.
Yeah, that was the kiosk in the center. Yep.
So that goes away. Why didn't the city just buy that and operate it itself and run it and make a profit off of that.
I don't know. There's another candidate for city council named Federico Muchnik. He's a documentarian, and he and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. But I am going to send you an awesome documentary he made about the Tasty. I don't know if you remember the Tasty, the burger.
Tasty,
not the Tasty Burger, not the new one, but the Tasty that was right at the corner, right by Out of Town News, which was a little burger joint. It's a great documentary, and it addresses that very thing. Why aren't we doing more to save those small businesses?
While you're at it, there should be a law that no burger costs more than $12. I can't stand $18 and $22 hamburger. If I can make it at home, I'm not paying $22 for it.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay. Well, on a larger scale, you got your climate change. I guess Cambridge is probably pretty good about that. But any policy that you would tweak?
Well, yeah, sure. I would make sure. I mean, it sounds like a broken record, but the truth is this: that Cambridge does have the means. They have a budget the size of Newark, New Jersey, right? A bigger budget than Newark, New Jersey, despite being 1/4 its size. And so, which means that Cambridge might have has resources to create a resilient city in the face of a ever increasingly hostile climate. Whatever policies we make. I'm a bartender, so I don't know exactly what we should be doing. We have to make sure that it's not causing displacement. When we displace folks, whether it's this, they aspirationally want to get create a carbon zero footprint for Cambridge, meaning that small restaurants, homeowners, and everything eventually will have to have no gas fixtures in the house. Would all have to be electric. That's a wonderful thing to aspire to. It won't really make a difference overall unless cities around the country and cities around the globe do the same thing. But it will have an impact on folks who are renting, on folks who will see their rents increase, whether they're residents or whether they're small businesses. Rents increase as buildings have to retrofit or fit themselves out with all electric fixtures. When I see something like that, I want to make sure that we're ensuring that we're not causing displacement.
So you're saying you want to make sure that that the city's efforts to bring in climate change do not displace people.
Exactly, because in that sense, we're creating climate refugees. Other cities in our the Commonwealth don't have the same resources as Cambridge. Cambridge has just like everybody in the state has to do more to make sure that our housing crisis is resolved. Cambridge itself has to do as much as it can. And we have to do as much as we can to resolve our climate issues in a way that focuses on climate justice.
Okay. Anything else that's important?
Well, I just think that, when I first thought about this, I was like a teenage father who tends bar. All of these things are not something to bring to the table of the city council, except I know so many people have had those same issues. And bartenders might not seem like a good politician too, but every night I'm doing things like de-escalating tense situations. We're making sure that people get their needs met and their voices heard. I think as a city council member, as much as I care about ensuring that lower and middle income folks feel empowered, I do want to come to it at a spirit of collaboration and a spirit of compromise. I think that our political discourse in Cambridge should not mirror Washington, but instead we should be instructing Washington.
I would think that being a bartender would make you particularly good at this because you understand what is on the mind of the people, because you're talking to them in a very real way. People share their feelings with bartenders a lot, especially a bartender like you who, you see people over and over and become quite friendly with them. You become actually pretty close to them.
Yep.
I think you would be particularly suited for the job.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. So if you know anybody in Cambridge, let them know.
Right. Yeah. And is it okay if I invite people to come to where you're at, where you work,
100%,
and talk? So it's Highland Kitchen. It's
150 Highland Ave.
About 10 days ago, I think it was a Sunday, I decided to walk there to meet my nephew, John.
Yeah.
On a rainy day. It was raining and pouring, and I walked all the way. I want some sort of credit for that. It took almost, it seems crazy, but almost 3 hours. It was far from where I am. Not far from everything, but far from where I am. But when I got there,
did you take? Did you take the steep hill or the less steep hill? There's a tough hill.
It was pretty darn it was pretty darn steep. I walked through Brookline and Brighton and kept going on and walked over one of those bridges, the bridge near the Shell station,
Yeah.
where the marathon bombers,
Yeah.
where the guy got out away and he escaped his BMW,
Yeah.
ran away, and then a lot of history. And then I kept walking through the neighborhoods. I saw an old guy on a porch drinking a Heineken. I stopped to chat with him. I said, I had it on my phone, but I like to talk to people.
Yeah.
I said, which way to Highland Kitchen? And he was pretty far away, but he still knew. And he said, I said, go this way, right? That's the phone says. And he goes, well, actually, if you want to, it's better if you just go Mass Ave. No, go this street and then cross Mass Ave and go up the hill. Oh my God, it took forever, but I got there and it was worth it. Really, really
Right on.
special place, and it's it's probably the reason that it's special is because folks like you work there. There's a particular friendly, knowledgeable vibe to the staff there, and that brings in a particular kind of cool and knowledgeable customer to make it a special place. And the food is spectacular, and it's a fair price. So I hesitate to tell people about it because it's already tough to get a seat at the bar to talk to you, but I guess it's my duty to let people know how to get in how to reach
if
you.
People see it. Maybe somebody else will take the idea and try to do the same thing. Instead of putting in chain restaurants, somebody will take a shot and open up another Sligo or one of the other great bars we've lost. So.
Chain businesses are the death of a community.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually the death of the nation. You drive across the country, it is a boring thing to do now.
Right.
You just see, what do you see? Kohl's and all these big chain stores all the way across the country.
Yeah.
Unless you take a train. All right, Joe McGuirk, thank you so much, and all the best to you, and the best of luck.
Thank you very much, Bradley.
I hope it works out, and it could work out. When you go into that voting booth, a lot of times when you go to vote, you really don't know the people. Well, now you know Joe. So
come by, say hi.
Come by and say hi, and click. You're on the ballot and everything.
Oh yeah, I'm on the ballot.
Okay, good.
Also, it's ranked choice voting in Cambridge. So if you do vote for me, I'm asking for your number one vote.
Number one vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Joe McGuirk, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Bradley J. Awesome.
Okay, and I'll see you soon. And by the way, everybody, if you're still with us, please check out my travel channel, Bradley J Travel. It took the entire pandemic to build, so just visit it. That's all I ask. Thanks a lot. We'll be done with the live broadcast, but don't go away, and I'll chat with you a little more.